Have you ever felt that unnerving sensation when you're alone in your room at night? The shadows seem to dance, and every creak of the floorboards sends chills down your spine. You might think it's just your imagination, but what if I told you that sometimes those shadows have a life of their own? Tonight, we'll explore chilling true stories that will haunt your dreams and remind you that the last shadow in your room isn't yours. In the dark, unseen horrors can lurk, and turning around might be the last mistake you ever make. The whispering shadows. The wind howled outside as the rain lashed against the windows of Emily's small apartment. It was the kind of night that drew shadows long and deep, creating a tapestry of darkness that seemed alive. She had just moved in, excited to start fresh in a new city, but there was something about this place that sent a shiver down her spine. Perhaps it was the way the lights flickered, or the cold drafts that whispered through the cracks in the walls. Emily brushed off her unease. Just nerves, she told herself as she settled into her bed, the covers pulled up tightly under her chin. She glanced at her phone. 11:47 p.m. The world outside was drowned in silence, save for the occasional rumble of thunder. It was then that she noticed it, a shadow darker than the night itself, slipping along the edges of her room. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, but as she turned to inspect, the shadow froze, merging seamlessly with the wall. Heart pounding, Emily squeezed her eyes shut and buried her face in her pillow. "It's just my imagination," she repeated, trying to drown out the growing sense of dread. But sleep wouldn't come. Minutes felt like hours, and just when she thought she might drift off, she heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible but unmistakably close. "Emily." It called her name with a breathy urgency. Her stomach twisted, and she turned slowly to face the source, half expecting to see someone standing in the corner. But the room was empty. Forcing herself to breathe, Emily dismissed the voice as her mind playing tricks. Yet, as the hours crawled by, the shadow reappeared, inching closer each time, its presence becoming more pronounced. She tried to convince herself it was just the shadows of her furniture, but deep down she knew something was wrong. The air grew heavier, charged with a palpable tension. Desperate for distraction, Emily grabbed her laptop and began scrolling through social media, searching for anything to ease her mind. Yet, as she focused on the screen, the whispering returned, now accompanied by a low, guttural growl. It reverberated through the room, vibrating against her chest, making her heart race even faster. "Emily," the voice was closer now, as if it were right beside her. With her pulse pounding in her ears, she dared to turn her head slightly, and that's when she saw it. The shadow was no longer just an amorphous dark figure. It had taken shape, looming over her bed, its features indistinguishable but unmistakably menacing. Panic surged through her, and for a moment she was frozen, caught in a web of terror. Suddenly, she bolted from her bed, throwing open the door and sprinting into the hallway. She needed to get out of that apartment, away from the darkness that seemed to reach for her. But the moment she stepped into the hall, she realized her mistake. The hallway was long and dimly lit, every door closed, and every shadow seemed to watch her retreat. Rushing to the stairwell, Emily descended the stairs two at a time, heart racing. As she reached the ground floor, she pushed open the heavy door to the outside world, feeling the cool air hit her face like a splash of cold water. She leaned against the brick wall of the building, trying to catch her breath, but the eerie feeling clung to her like a fog. As she glanced back at the entrance, the lights flickered, and she saw it again, a fleeting shadow darting past the window of her apartment. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but a part of her wanted to confront whatever was haunting her. Was it real? Or just a figment of her imagination? With every ounce of courage, Emily made her way back inside, determined to face the shadow. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing in the silence. As she approached her door, she hesitated, hand hovering over the doorknob. The whispered voice beckoned again, softer now, almost pleading. "Emily." The moment her fingers touched the knob, the air shifted, felt charged electric. Gathering her courage, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was still, as if it had been waiting for her return. But the shadows, They were thicker, more oppressive. The darkness seemed to breathe, swirling and writhing in the corners of the room. Emily's heart raced as she felt a chill wrap around her, seeping into her bones. It was a presence, a heavy weight that pressed against her, urging her to leave. Yet she stood her ground, ready to confront her fear. "Show yourself," she shouted into the darkness, voice trembling but firm. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The air was suffocating, the silence deafening. Just when she thought she would be swallowed by the night, the shadow surged forward, coalescing into a figure before her. It wasn't a person. It was an amalgamation of dark energy, flickering and shifting, eyes glinting like shards of glass. The air grew colder, and the whisper returned, louder and more insistent. "Emily, you shouldn't have come back." Fear coursed through her veins, but instead of running, she took a step closer. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, trying to mask her terror with defiance. The shadow seemed to hesitate, as if considering her question. "You shouldn't have ignored me," it finally replied, voice now echoing like a chorus of lost souls. "I am the guardian of this place, and you have awakened me." As the shadow spoke, the room twisted, reality bending around her. Images flashed in her mind, previous tenants, each one falling prey to the darkness that lingered within these walls. They had ignored the warnings, the whispers that called to them in the night. Panic surged within her as the weight of her situation pressed down harder. "I didn't know," she breathed, feeling the tears prick at her eyes. "I just wanted a new start." A moment of silence hung in the air before the shadow responded, its voice dripping with sorrow. "You cannot escape what has been awakened. The shadows are part of you now." Emily felt a sense of dread seep into her core. The room began to spin, and the whispers grew louder, crashing against her like waves. She clutched her head, trying to block it all out, but the shadows pulled at her, reaching for her very essence. "Please," she cried, desperation clawing at her throat. "What do I need to do?" The shadow flickered, the air shimmering with energy. "You must confront your fears. Embrace the darkness or be consumed by it." With those final words echoing in her mind, Emily knew she faced a choice that could alter her fate forever. Embracing the darkness. The air in the room was thick with tension, and Emily could feel the shadows tightening around her, pulsating as if alive. The presence loomed before her, an entity formed from the collective fears of those who had come before. She took a deep breath, steadied her shaking hands, and resolved to confront the darkness that had invaded her life. "What do you mean I have to embrace the darkness?" she asked, her voice trembling but laced with determination. The shadow swirled, its form undulating like smoke caught in an unseen breeze. "Your fear feeds me," it replied, a chorus of whispers layering its voice, haunting and melodic. "Only by facing your inner demons can you reclaim your freedom. You must let go of what binds you to this world, to this place." Emily's heart raced as she considered its words. She had always pushed her fears deep down, burying them beneath layers of bravado and denial. But now, standing in the grip of this terrifying entity, she realized that avoidance wouldn't save her. She had to confront the very thing she tried to escape. "Fine," she said, her voice gaining strength. "If you want me to face my fears, then show me." The shadow recoiled slightly, as if taken aback by her willingness. With a wave of its hand, the atmosphere shifted, and the room transformed. Walls dissolved, and Emily found herself standing in a familiar setting, a dimly lit hallway from her childhood home, the air thick with nostalgia and unaddressed fears. Memories flooded back, each one tinted with a sense of dread. She could hear the echo of her younger self, tiptoeing down this very hall late at night, the unsettling feeling that someone was watching her from the shadows. That old fear washed over her like cold water, reminding her of the countless nights spent sleeping with the lights on, convinced that something sinister lurked in the dark corners. "Why are we here?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because this is where it began," the shadow replied, its voice swirling around her. "Face the memories you've buried. Only then can you understand the darkness that clings to you." As she walked down the hallway, The walls began to pulse with life, images flickering like old film reels. She saw herself as a child, peering into the dark living room, feeling a creeping terror as she swore she saw a figure standing by the window, its face hidden in shadows. "Mom," she had cried, her voice cracking with fear. But her mother's laughter echoed back, dismissive and soothing. "There's nothing there, sweetie. Just your imagination." Yet Emily had felt it, something dark and unsettling that refused to be ignored. "Mom was wrong," she murmured to herself, feeling the weight of regret. "I should have trusted my instincts." The shadow loomed behind her, its form shifting and blending with the memories. "You must acknowledge the truth. Fear thrives in denial." Emily continued down the hall, each step heavy with the burden of her past. Suddenly, she was transported to another memory. A sleepover with friends, giggles filling the room until the lights went out, and one friend dared them to look under the bed. They had all screamed when the darkness beneath seemed to pulse with life, shadows writhing as they imagined the worst. "We're just being silly," her friend had laughed. But that laughter had faltered when one by one, they saw the dark figure crawling out from beneath the bed, eyes glowing like embers. "Why didn't we run?" Emily asked, pain flooding her chest. "Why did we stay?" "Because fear is a powerful anchor," the shadow whispered, drawing closer. "It keeps you rooted in place, unable to escape." The memories continued to unravel, each one a thread pulling her deeper into the web of her fears. She felt herself spiraling into a memory she had long buried. A family vacation in a secluded cabin in the woods. It was supposed to be a fun getaway. But at night, Emily had heard whispers through the walls, strange scratching sounds that filled her with dread. On the last night of their trip, as the adults laughed and drank, she had crept out of bed, compelled to follow the sounds. Outside, the moon bathed the forest in an eerie glow, and Emily wandered deeper, drawn by the whispers. "Emily," they called her name in a seductive tone, urging her to come closer. But as she approached the source, she stumbled upon a shadowy figure hunched over, its face obscured. It turned, and she saw nothing but darkness, an emptiness that consumed everything in its path. She had screamed, running back to the cabin, but the fear had lingered long after, gnawing at her. "Face it," the shadow behind her urged. "Face the moment you turned your back." "I did," she protested. "I ran away." "And what did you learn?" it pressed, swirling around her like a storm. The room twisted again, and Emily was plunged into darkness. In this void, she could feel her fear manifesting, swirling around her like a tempest. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she felt lost, paralyzed by the weight of her own memories. But then she heard it, the whispering not of dread but of understanding. "You are stronger than this. You have the power to break free." Gathering her courage, Emily opened her eyes and steadied herself. "I won't let you control me anymore," she declared, voice echoing through the dark. "I refuse to be a prisoner of my own fears." As she spoke those words, the shadows began to retract, pulling back like a tide. The oppressive weight lifted, and the darkness around her faded, revealing the hallway again, now illuminated by a warm glow. "You've taken the first step," the shadow intoned, its voice softer now, almost gentle. "Embrace your strength." Emily felt the remnants of fear melting away, replaced by a burgeoning sense of empowerment. She realized that confronting her fears didn't mean being unafraid. It meant acknowledging them, understanding their roots, and choosing to move forward despite them. But just as she began to feel victorious, the shadow shifted, becoming more menacing again. "But there is still more to face," it warned. "Not all shadows can be conquered so easily." With those words, the hallway began to shift once more, morphing into another memory, this one darker, more haunting than the last. Emily could feel the pull of dread creeping back in, but she steeled herself, ready to confront whatever awaited her. The shadows gathered around her once more, and she stepped forward, determined to face the next chapter of her nightmare. Each step echoed with the weight of her past, and she braced herself for the unknown horrors that awaited. The echoes of regret. As the shadows closed in around Emily, the hallway transformed yet again. This time, she found herself in a dimly lit bedroom, one that felt eerily familiar. The walls were adorned with posters of bands she had loved as a teenager, the bed unmade, clothes strewn across the floor. It was a snapshot of her youth, but as she stepped further inside, a chill washed over her. This was her childhood room, a place where laughter and dreams once thrived, but it was now cloaked in a heavy veil of regret. She could almost hear the echoes of her younger self, whispering promises of what life could be, dreams of adventure, happiness, and love. But shadows lurked in the corners, reminders of unfulfilled potential and choices made out of fear. As she approached the bed, a sense of melancholy settled over her. On the nightstand lay an old journal, its pages yellowed with time. The urge to open it was overwhelming, but dread held her back. What if the words inside were too painful? Yet, the shadow behind her nudged her forward, urging her to confront her past. With trembling hands, Emily picked up the journal and flipped it open. The first entry was dated nearly a decade ago, and her younger self poured her heart out on the pages. She wrote of dreams of becoming an artist, of wanting to travel the world, but beneath the excitement lay a current of fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection. "I don't know if I'm good enough," the entry read. "What if I never make it?" Tears pricked at Emily's eyes as she read those words, a mirror reflecting her own insecurities. She had let those fears dictate her life, allowing them to silence her voice. As she turned the pages, each entry became more haunting, revealing the gradual descent into self-doubt. In one entry, she recalled an opportunity to showcase her art in a local gallery, a chance to step into the light and share her passion with the world. But fear had held her back. "What if nobody likes it?" she had written, sealing her fate with her own doubts. She had never submitted her work, never took the leap. The shadow loomed closer, its presence a reminder of her missed opportunities. "You see, this is what happens when you let fear dictate your choices. You build walls around your heart, but it only leads to regret." "No," Emily said, shaking her head, fighting back against the swell of despair. "I can't change the past, but I can change how I move forward. I won't be bound by this fear anymore." As if in response, the room darkened, and the walls began to ripple. Memories flickered to life around her, faces of friends, family, and mentors who had encouraged her to pursue her passion. But alongside them were those who had doubted her, the naysayers whose words had cut deep and lingered long after. "Remember them," the shadow urged. "Remember the ones who didn't believe." The room transformed, and Emily found herself standing in front of a group of peers in high school, their laughter ringing in her ears. She could see herself, a younger version, hesitating to share her artwork during a class presentation. She could feel the eyes of her classmates, some supportive, others dismissive. "Just show us already," someone had yelled, laughter ringing out, sharp and cruel. The memory twisted, and she could feel the sting of shame as she stepped back, retreating into the shadows of her own insecurities. "Stop it," she shouted, covering her ears as the laughter echoed around her. "That's not who I am anymore. I won't let those memories control me." The laughter faded, replaced by a silence so thick it felt suffocating. Every doubt, every regret, every moment of weakness she had ever felt. But within that storm she found her anchor. She focused on the light she had discovered within herself, the warmth of hope and resilience. "I choose to stand tall," she declared, pushing back against the darkness. "I will no longer be defined by my fears." In an instant, the shadows recoiled, writhing in response to her newfound strength. The void began to shift, the darkness giving way to radiant light. She could feel her energy rising, a pulse of brightness radiating from her core. "Stop," the voice screamed, now filled with desperation. "You cannot escape me. I am the darkness that resides within you." "No," Emily shouted, her voice rising above the cacophony. "You are not me. You are a part of my past, but you do not define my future." With a burst of resolve, she summoned all her strength, the light expanding until it engulfed her completely. The shadows howled in fury as they were pushed back, their grasp weakening. Emily felt a sense of clarity washing over her, like a cleansing tide. Suddenly, the void shattered like glass, splintering into a million pieces of darkness that fell away to reveal a beautiful landscape bathed in sunlight, a world full of color, life, and endless possibilities. She stood in a vibrant meadow, flowers blooming in a riot of colors, birds singing in the trees. "This is who I am," Emily whispered, her heart swelling with joy. "This is the life I choose." But as she turned to explore this new reality, she heard a faint whisper behind her. "You may have won this battle, but I will always be a part of you." Emily felt the familiar chill creep back into her heart, the remnants of the shadow lingering like a ghost. "You will not control me," she stated firmly, looking back into the fading darkness. "You will not dictate my life." The shadow flickered, merging with the remnants of the void. "Remember, fear is a powerful weapon," it hissed, the voice growing fainter. "It can always return when you least expect it." "Then I will be ready," Emily declared, standing tall. "I will embrace the light and use it to illuminate even the darkest corners of my mind. I will learn to navigate my fears, but I will not let them consume me." With those final words, the darkness faded entirely, leaving behind only a shimmering glow that filled her heart with warmth. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the shadows lift from her shoulders. As Emily explored her new surroundings, she realized that the meadow was not just a physical space. It was a reflection of her inner journey. Each flower represented a dream she had once buried, each tree a lesson learned. She felt a renewed sense of purpose as she walked, the warmth of the sun embracing her like a long-lost friend. In the distance, she spotted a path winding through the trees. Driven by curiosity, she followed it, feeling a sense of adventure bubbling within her. As she walked, she thought about the power she now held, the ability to confront her fears and turn them into stepping stones rather than barriers. But as she ventured deeper into the woods, she noticed a gathering of shadows at the edge of the path. They lingered just beyond the sunlight, whispering among themselves. Despite the warmth surrounding her, a chill ran down her spine. "What do you want?" Emily called, her voice steady. She had come too far to allow fear to creep back in. One of the shadows stepped forward, taking a more defined shape, a figure she recognized from her past. It was her younger self, the one who had been too afraid to speak up, to share her art, to chase her dreams. "You think you can just forget us?" her younger self accused, eyes wide with fear and doubt. "You think you can leave us behind?" "I don't want to forget you," Emily replied softly. "You were a part of my journey, but you don't have to dictate my future. I've learned from you." "But you still fear the darkness," the shadow protested. "You can't escape what's inside you." "No, I can't escape it," Emily said, taking a step closer. "But I can learn to navigate it. I can shine a light on it, and in doing so, I will find my way." As she spoke those words, the meadow around her shimmered with brilliance. The shadows began to recede, the darkness that had once defined her beginning to dissolve. The shadows of her past were no longer a threat, they were simply a part of her story. "You can be free," she said, extending her hand to her younger self. "We can all be free if we face the darkness together." The younger Emily hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. But as she looked into her older self's face, she saw strength and determination reflected back. Slowly, the shadow reached out, and as their hands touched, a wave of light surged through the air. The shadows surrounding them dissipated, dissolving into a soft glow. Emily felt a surge of energy flow between them, a connection that bridged from her heart as she confronted each memory, acknowledging the darkness that had once cast shadows over her life but no longer held power. Finally, they reached the edge of the meadow, where the landscape opened up to a breathtaking horizon, a vast expanse of possibilities, each representing a different path, a different choice. The sky above shimmered with colors of dawn, signaling the start of a new day. "This is our future," Emily said, pointing toward the horizon. "It's waiting for us." But as they stood there, a familiar chill swept through the air, and the shadows began to gather once more at the edges of the meadow, creeping closer like an encroaching storm. The figures that emerged were not just reminders of fear. They were all the doubts, insecurities, and regrets